Whoa, making a video. Okay, I'm gonna get a new catch line. Like, God, I hate you. Anyway, so, Jay Sounder video, I suppose. React to some of his craps, his junk, his stuff. Said a lot of stuff. And, it all comes down to now, apparently. I don't know, I only watched part of some new video where he talks about spirituality and blah, 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 and that's the bottom line. Is that he just doesn't buy into this evolution thing as being the whole answer. It's more than matter and energy. Consciousness is not satisfied with the explanations. So anyway, we'll go through that. But anyway, he used I just really hate this bullshit tactic of distorting. That's all it is. So anyway, use this story from, I've expressed like my first perception of the world as not being one of, oh yeah, it all makes sense to me. No, it was more of a what the fuck kind of moment. And he turned that into a horror moment. And it's just these little things that people keep doing that just isn't the truth. And so it's just dishonest. I mean, I didn't react with horror. I reacted with, this is going to need explanation. That's how I reacted. Okay, I didn't find it understandable. Boy, so I guess a deer stepped on. There must be a lot of glass back here. Anyway, so yeah, I reacted decidedly negative. I just wasn't at all like, oh yes, it instantly makes sense. It's all quite... oh yeah, I get it. I totally didn't get it, and I needed to know what the hell was going on, because it all just felt weird. Not horrible, just weird. So I just want to make that clarification. And so yes, I asked the questions, and I found the answers to be wanting. On the converse, his apparent impression was, wow, it's a big, giant, wonderful universe. Or something like that. Yeah. And he just, I suppose, said, yes, it's all mysterious, but I'm not going to ask the questions, and I'm certainly not going to demand an answer, because it's all so super cool that who would want to find fault? And so let's all just start doing what we feel. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of a cheat on a paraphrase. But anyway... So he didn't have a problem with antinatalism or ephilism or any of this stuff. He has a problem with atheism. So, I mean, this isn't about me. This is about him and his problems dealing with his attempt to come up with a coherent explanation for reality, with, I would suspect, the premise being that he lived in a world of spiritual mumbo jumbo most of his life, and he's basically just migrated back to it because it's, as he puts it in one of his statements, it's more beneficial psychologically, and that's all he is. His quotes are all over the place now. I mean, he's an ethical or moral nihilist, yet he believes consciousness is more than matter and energy, which is, hard to make sense out of that. I mean, how you could draw the conclusion that there's no absolute value when you haven't defined what your consciousness is, when you haven't established the limitations of its whatever, its function. We use that word again. So anyway, I did take some notes, but I just don't know whether there's any point, because like I said, this is going all the way back to the very beginning. So fundamentally, he's some sort of religious person. And he doesn't buy evolution as a complete story. He doesn't buy this brain function as having only evolutionary function, I guess. I mean, maybe he does, but he thinks that somehow it's manifesting something else from some other dimension of the universe. and I don't know what would that be, like freedom, the freedom dimension. Yes, he doesn't believe in determinism anymore either. And I mean, it goes, it's a complete, reversal into the spiritualism of the gaps. And I don't even, to me, they're not even gaps. I mean, he just wants a better answer. We know what consciousness is. We know why we have it. It's a byproduct function. So I think I'll talk about that first. It exists because it creates behavior. We're organisms in environments, and this is a more elaborate, filtered way of behaving. Having a brain means that you can go into the world and act in a more nuanced, more specialized manner, and therefore increase your capacity to survive. That's why we have one of these devices. The trick is, the consciousness is using, our brains are using a mechanism to create behavior that relies on the establishment of value. So what it does is essentially say there's a vague thing that has value, which is out there. There's stuff called food, and you need to ingest it. And so it gives us this vague goal. And the only way it can make that goal something we will chase is somehow it has to make it attractive. It has to make it something we will chase. And then it uses the same resources of the brain to scheme ways to catch the thing it establishes as chaseable. But the only way to create that chaseability is to establish value, to establish good and bad. So that's easy to understand. Predators trying to eat you is bad. You trying to eat prey, good. And so it establishes a mechanism to preserve the integrity of the biological organism, to prevent it from incurring damage, and to encourage it, to discourage the damage, encourage the consumption that'll make it flourish. And so the byproduct of attempting to synthesize this thing called value is the irony that our brain has created actual value by creating sentience, by creating the capacity to feel good and bad, good or bad, pleasant, unpleasant, satisfied, unsatisfied, repulsed or attracted. And that's yes, it's a simple explanation, but that's all you need. It covers the whole thing. It explains its existence. Yes, it has billions of cells. It has lots of wiring and nuances and synapses and all kinds of crap going on. But the end effect we can realize as, yes, we have unconscious mechanisms of programming, and we have this conscious field, this conscious space in our brain where our brain synthesizes the different inputs and the outputs and creates this illusion, this sense of the world. And it's just no magic there. To say it's mysterious, yes, of course, we don't have blueprints of it. But frankly, if I showed you the blueprints, I don't think you're going to understand them anyway. I could show you the blueprints for the nuclear reactor in an aircraft carrier. Are you going to understand them? Is it going to make nuclear energy understandable to you? I'm not quite sure it will. So I don't even know if a blueprint is going to really tell you. It's going to be mentally intuitive in terms of being able to see how a brain can synthesize, create a theater that is consciousness. It's one of those things. It just is. And yes, it's probably understandable, but it's always going to be understandable in a context of strangeness. Whatever, I don't want to rag on that one forever. But these are really fundamentally important subjects, as I don't think Jay is fundamentalist spiritual enough to not accept evolution and not recognize that is our origin, and that our brain is manufactured for a specific function. Now, the fact that he has spiritualized that function is another issue. It is his contention that we have no obligation to rise above or evolve above the crude nature. So the built-in, the original hardware should never be updated. We should stay, Morse code. We should never evolve to radio or TV or anything else. We should just accept the primitive function and not attempt as intellects to realize we can achieve better psychological ambitions than consumption and reproduction. That we're certainly capable of that. Just consuming and just reproducing. In terms of doing it viscerally or without any limits. Clearly we can consume more gracefully. We don't have to chase things down and beat them with clubs until they're dead, which we never really did anyway. It's all just such a fallacy that human beings were carnivores for much of their history because they're not capable of chewing or digesting, raw animals. But anyway, that's a whole other subject. But it's all part of the fantasy narratives that get written. It really is humid. This paper's like, ugh. Well, it's not humid. It's misty. It's cold. It's my first day in long pants since April. Anyway, so I did write some stuff. I can't even read it. That's pretty cool. I don't think I was deceptive. He deceived himself, he says. Yeah, whatever. I think whatever your psychology was, it had absolutely nothing to do with me. And it has everything to do with you and your problems. And that's just the truth. And I think it was a lot more about your own, finding your own power, and giving nothing, pretty much. All right, not good to psychological well-being. So that's the thing where he gets under this. You think about all the times that Jay has used the word truth, and now he basically has, he's arguing quite overtly that truth is, man, that sewage smells, is quite unimportant. And what's important is psychological well-being. So this you can talk about for a long time, and how much of this is controlling what's called philosophy. This idea that somehow the truth has to be a happy truth, or it's not the truth. And that seems to be the obligation, that we are first, as psychology, in need of feeding, and only as a secondary, maybe if we feel like it, function, maybe if it's fun, we'll use our faculty of reasoning and logic to explain the reality to ourselves, to have reality exposed to ourselves. And so this kind of takes us full circle to my story, where I had the awakening on Earth as pretty much a what the fuck moment, and then started asking questions and received answers that may have been psychologically enjoyable to some, but they were too insipid, so I couldn't use them. I couldn't. They didn't resolve the what the fuck. They didn't resolve the question. They didn't answer the question, and so they just were inadequate. Not in that they didn't make me feel good. They just didn't answer the question. So there was no value in making me feel resolving my what the fuck. And so I was stuck needing to dig and scratch at my world to find out where I really was, because I pretty much declared the people I was interacting with despicable liars. They just didn't have anything to say but drivel and babble. And, that's not going to resolve anything. But this idea of glorifying our fundamental psychology, giving it any credibility as a designer of our function, is just to say something like, we're just great white sharks, let's just be sharks. We're just Tyrannosaurus, let's just be Tyrannosaurus. I mean, it just doesn't have any intellectual integrity. It just is, it's such a denial of the one faculty, again I will quote Inherit the Wind, that separates us from the animals, is the fact that we can think and ponder these questions, and that we can understand the difference between a lie and the truth. And these people are basically saying, because they have annihilated value, they have found it to be irrelevant except when it comes to their personal satisfaction, which is kind of funny, correct? I mean, they don't think anything has value in the world except their personal comfort. I mean, they don't need to resolve it for everything else. They just need to know that I personally want, and that's the only want I got to pay attention to. That's the only sense of urgency there is. And there's nothing you could say. I mean, that's so immature. I don't have time to do this. Sorry, just looking. I am running behind. Not one of my better days, of course. But yeah. I mean, they really are better than they were 2 weeks ago. So I shouldn't complain, but man, I would like to just I'd like to go back 20 years. And I was still complaining back then, but those days were so much better than these in terms of how I felt. Anyway, chick's coming, so that's good. Running chick. somewhere. This doesn't matter. Mostly. Gave her a wave, but she didn't acknowledge my existence, sadly. Anyway, it's just the way it goes. Concentrating. So yeah, this is just like, somebody wants to spend time reconverting Jay to atheism? I certainly am not terribly interested. So, quite frankly, he has parroted many of the arguments, and they have left him unpersuaded. So there's not much you can say. And I can't really argue with somebody who thinks everybody should just do what they want. I mean, that our intelligence isn't the more respectable of the functions of our consciousness. That desire is the least respectable, and intelligence is the most respectable. He sees it exactly the other way around, and I find that entirely self-indulgent, self-serving, and clearly just a manifestation of a egomaniacal psychology. He is controlled by his selfishness and completely, and there's just nothing else to say. So his philosophy will blow with the winds of his personal psychology. So when he's feeling strong, the world will be a good place. When he's feeling weak, the world will be a bad place. And he will never, maybe never, be able to understand that you reflect in both places on perspective. You don't forget the good times in the bad times, and you don't forget the bad times in the good times. And that is the rational, logical thing to do. But whatever. You can't argue with psychology. You can't argue with bigotry. You can't argue with prejudice. You can't argue with psychological preference. You can only argue with people who wish to engage in a discussion bounded, by what we know to be the truth, and such. Hey, the garage door isn't open. I don't have the code. I guess the dog didn't bark. Anyway, till next time.